Hello and welcome back to training. This is John, and what I'd like to discuss now is to show you how to make modifications to the slider on the front page of the site. Let's go ahead and open up the site so I can point out what I'm talking about here. So here we have the site loaded up. Now, so you're aware, when we log in, we will see these entries up at the very top. However, if we're just viewing the site as a person who's not logged in, that won't be visible. But here we have the website, and this is the slider to which I'm referring. It has the three images on it. You can click between them, scroll around, there's some text. So I'd like to show you how to change the images, change the text, and post those changes so that everyone can see them. So in this particular case, we're not going to do what you might think is normal. Typically, you would go straight to the page and make modifications there. But since this particular component, this widget, has its own special editor, we're going to do it there. And here is the editor. Right now in the system, there are three defined. This happens to be the one that we're using on the top of the front page. It's called Home Page Full Screen. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll edit the slides. Here we have each of the sliders, each of the tiles rather in the slider, and we can grab a hold of it on the right side and change the order. We can delete a slide. We can duplicate it if we want to have something slightly different, and we can edit the slide. Editing is where we go to do just about everything we need. And here we go. You can do all of your editing in addition to selecting it from that front page. You can just select the slide you want here in each tab and make the modifications. Let's talk a little bit about what these are. The title is, of course, the internal name used for the slide. Is it published or is it unpublished? If you want to, you can create a slider with 10 or 15 or 20 slides in it and only publish a few at a time. That will give the impression of a constant updating, and yet you have actually pre-created them and decided to turn them on and off at your leisure. You can set up slides so that they expire. They have a shelf life. A good example of that is election season. Whenever you create a slide that has anything to do with elections, you can have them expire a month after or a week before or at whatever point you wish. You can also pre-create slides where they're visible from a particular date. So if we created a new slide and said it's not available until September 7th, that's when it would become visible onto the screen. Typically, though, you're going to want to create them with no start and end date so that they're visible immediately and only go away when you decide that they are no longer necessary. The transitions, this is kind of an advanced features. We've got it set right now to random selection of whatever kind of transitions are available in the list. But if you prefer one kind to another, you can just select it off of this list. I recommend that you play around a little bit, create an unpublished slider, and select each of these so that you see how they work, and you can decide which ones you like best and not. The slots, the number of slots is essentially how many boxes that the slide is divided into, and what that means is you're sectioning out the slide for various other entities that you might want to put into it, like text and flying logos and all kinds of other things. Leave it at 7. I wouldn't make it over 7, and you might want to decide to make it less than 7. Should you have a tile that really has one very large, a singular color in it, blob for you to put text in, but leave it at 5, 6, or 7 so that you have some flexibility about where things get placed in the timeline when you're sliding text across and such. Rotation is very simply, do you want to rotate the image? And typically you don't. Transition duration is how long in milliseconds that you want the duration of the transition itself to last. So 300 in this case, it's the default. It also happens to be 0.3 of a second. It's a pretty fast transition, but any slower than that would almost seem like the site was going in slow motion. A delay is how long it takes for it to appear or disappear. And just leave it blank, let the system default handle that. Now, enable linking. That's probably going to be a pretty common feature for you. This is how you tie the slide to either a page on your website or to another website. If you want it to be a regular link, that can send it outside. You can send it to another slide. So there's a lot of things you can do here. If you want to send it regular, you're going to put a full link in here. This would create a link to the GOP website. The next option here is, do you want to open the link in the current window, meaning they replace your current website with theirs, or do you want to do a new window? I recommend, if you're sending them out of your site, to open it up in a new window. That way they can always see where they came from. I'm going to turn off the links for this particular tile because I don't want to save that. Classes are, actually, let me skip thumbnails. Thumbnails are good when you want somebody to be able to see these images before they're actually preloaded. Some users will have issues with bandwidth limitation, and they will be given the option as to whether to load or not load an image. So you can create a very small version of the image so that they can get an idea of what it looks like, attach it, and they will see those thumbnails instead of the images themselves. The class, again, that's an advanced feature of CSS. It essentially ties a whole bunch of attributes to this item. Same thing with the ID, it quickly identifies it. Any special unique attributes that you'd like to add, and any custom fields. Again, this is all advanced, and I do not recommend you make any changes to it. Now, continuing on, we have the kind of meat and potatoes here, and this is where you get to select the image. You can select the image from your own media library, which of course is always going to be the most efficient. You also have the option of taking it from another website, or leaving it as a transparent space, or a solid colored space. These all are pretty self-explanatory. External URL means you're pulling it from another website. The danger there is, of course, it might be copyrighted material or otherwise protected. They also, at the other website, could decide to move that image from one location to another, rendering your link broken. I don't usually recommend you do this unless you're tying into some special event, maybe fundraiser with the United Way. You might want to pull their URL, their image, for the duration of the fundraising event. Transparent, probably you won't use that often. You When you do that, you leave the background showing through. Could be disorienting, the position that it's in on the site. And solid colored, again, it's probably not something you're going to use very often. Continuing on, got the background settings. Background fit cover means that we're overlaying the background. Contain means we're going to live inside of the container. Percent is percent width and height of the screen. And then normal would be whatever the image itself wants to do. We're saying cover because in this particular case we're running a full width slider, so we want it to cover the entire page. Background repeat, we do not want it repeated, but you can repeat on the natural resolution of the image. You can repeat on the x-axis, that's left to right, or you can repeat on the y-axis, that's top to bottom. And the background position, these are all pretty self-explanatory. Center top means that you're going to align the image on the center at the top border, center on the right border, center at the bottom, and center means directly in the center of the image. You're going to place it into whatever space is available, and it's always going to be centered, and so on and so forth. The Ken Burns pan zoom setting is very nifty. You can have the image zooming in and out from a particular aspect to another aspect, and it's a very cool feature. It is an advanced feature. I would recommend you play with it with various settings in a slider that you're not going to publish, so you can see how it all works. Now down to the slide itself. This helper grid is only a very simple way of showing you relative positions within the image when you're placing objects like text on it. You're not going to see these lines in the browser when you're visiting the site. This is only for designing. And snapping to means that when you're placing items onto this, you're going to snap them to a particular coordinate. So for instance, if I put the letter Q somewhere nearby here, it's going to snap to the corner of this particular square. In layers, snap layers to specific portion of the grid, and layers you're going to see down below what they are. And here we have the layers. Each of these options consists of a layer. You can consider layers pretty much like layers of an onion. Bottom layer, bottom peel, is the image, and that as you work your way up are the other layers that you add to it. So these would be the outer layers of the skin. And you know that they're at the outer layers because you can see them. If they were behind the image, you wouldn't see them. So what do we have here? We have here is the text that is Politics is Women's Work. There's a style applied to it. There are many styles you can select from. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the example show up. I recommend you stick with the style that it's already connected with because it is appropriate for this kind of background. Size is also something that's appropriate. You want headers to stand out, to kind of be bigger than the rest of the text. The second line here has a different style. It's called Slide 1 Text LRWF. It's a style I created specifically for you guys, and it makes the text a little bit bigger than what the default is, so it's easier to read, especially on mobile devices. Now, should you want to change the style, you can actually change it here, and above you'll see an example of the changes you're making before they're actually posted. You can make changes to color, you can make changes to the font, you can make changes to the background of the text. You can say it's transparent or it's not transparent. You can select a color for that background. If you want a border around the text, this is where you do that. Right now it's set to 0, but you can actually put a border around it if you choose. Now, if you prefer to make your changes in the text editor, essentially you're modifying the CSS, the cascading style sheets. This is where you do that. So you can make all of these changes manually and save them. So there you go. I'm going to cancel out. I don't want to make any changes to the style. These are some of the sections where you can imagine the image at, and we have placed this text into this section of the image. This is rotation. We have no rotation, so none of these values matter, but if you rotate it, you can rotate it and tell it that you want a percentage of the x-axis, which is left to right, and a percentage of the y-axis, which is up and down, to apply to that rotation. You can change the parallax settings. Parallax is a feature of these images that as they slide by, up and down or left and right, it's almost like when you see a mountain way in the background and you're traveling on a train, the trees up close to you fly by very quickly, but the mountain moves by very slowly out in the background. Well, that's what parallax does, and the image, the lowest image that you have, is essentially taking the place of that mountain. So as you scroll, it will move slower than the foreground. And this is the level you select at which for the parallax to be layered out. Now, layer animation. This is where you animate values. Okay, so this particular item, which happens to be the Republican women or the life of the party, is set to fade in after 1/2 of a second. 500 milliseconds is 1/2 of a second. Are you splitting the text? No, you're not, but you could. You can do it character-based, word-based, or line-based. What that means is that as the items are made visible, or they slide in, or they spin in, whatever animation you choose, this is how it's applying it. Char-based means each letter would perform the action until all of them are down or visible. Word-based means each word has the animation applied to it. And line-based means every line in the text that you've entered will have that action applied to it. The end transition, in this case, it's automatic, meaning once it's done fading in, it's done. But you could add an end animation. For instance, it could fade in and then shift a little bit left, shift right, move around the page. You can have a lot of different things configured here. And then, do you want the animation looped, meaning it's going to start over and over again? So you can loop it on a pendulum, you can loop it rotating, you can slide it in and out, you can pulse it, you can make it wave. All of those are canned animations. Now here on the right is where you see the timing of each of the animations relative to each other. And you can see that the layer example is showing you what this does. So this one is coming in with a character-based slide in, and this one fades in. Now you're not seeing any text because it's white. Now the advanced parameters, you probably don't want to mess around with this too much, but again, if you are going to play with them, I recommend that you do it on a slider that you have not published so you can see how it affects the images, the text, and all of the animations. So do you want to link these slides together? You have that option here. You can caption sharp corners. That's when you oh my god, I'm drawing a blank here. I'll get back to you on that one. Um, advanced responsive settings, you want responsiveness throughout all the levels, meaning that they aren't handled as a single block. So if the image is made very, very small, the text will not necessarily be made very, very small when it shrinks down to the size required for a cell phone, for instance, versus a standard browser. The hide under width means if you make it so narrow that the image or the text cannot be displayed, the attribute will hide it. So if you have a very long amount of text and it can't be displayed easily on a cell phone, it'll disappear when it's displayed on the cell phone. This is all going to depend on how it actually looks on a site. So I don't know that I would turn this on unless you find a specific need to. And there you have it. Now you know how to modify any of these attributes in a slide. So now what we're going to do is add a slide. Simply click the Add Slide button. And there we go. Call it New Slide. 4. Oops, number sign. I'm going to create it unpublished. Let's say it's always going to be visible. Leave these transition settings as they are. I'm not going to create a link. I'm not going to modify any of the class update information. And let's go ahead and select a background. Let's see. We'll pick the GLP again. There it is. Now again, these settings we're covering the screen. We're not repeating it. We're centering it on the top. If we wanted to center, if the image wasn't big, if the image was bigger than the area, actually center it. In this case, since it's smaller, we're not making any modification here. So now we don't have any layers here. There's no text. There's no anything. Let's add a layer. The layer will be to the party. Again, please don't read anything into what I'm typing here. I'm just making stuff up as we go along. Click here to join. Insert a button. Insert it as a blue button. So in this link, this is the text that will display. So the sentence will say click. There will be a button that says here, and back to regular text to join. And there we go. We can move it around, place it wherever we want it on the screen. Of course, we can scroll back and forth if we want to see what's to the left or to the right. Now, this text seems to me a little bit small, so let's select another font here, large, bold, white. There we have it. So now we've added this text. Let's add some animation to this. And let's see, we'll randomly rotate it so that sometimes it'll slide in, sometimes it'll spin in, sometimes it'll fall in. Let's split it by word. And I think that looks okay, at least for now. So let's go ahead and save all this. Now the slide's been updated. And I think I like it, so let's go ahead and publish it. Granted, we are going to delete this, so don't worry about that. And let's look at what it looks like now that it's published. Notice now that there are 4 dots at the bottom. Let it cycle through. There you go. Welcome to the party. Click here. The size of the text is a little wider than the area we have available, so we can go back to the slider and we can left and make it a little bit smaller. Medium white. Have medium white. It's too small. Again, I recommend that you play with all of these so that you can see how they all look. It's too big. Let's use the one that we had created before. So now we'll save it. And because the status is set to publish, it will automatically be available on the next refresh. Okay, well, we have a little bit of an issue here with the width of this section. Let's go ahead and take a look and see what we've got going here. I think this is the issue. I'm just going ahead and speeding up the process of getting to that last page. Okay, and that didn't seem to have an effect. Oh, changed it back. I wonder why. Sorry, I will have placed this over. Do is make this a bit bigger. 10 set. $800 wide. Let's do 1024. There we go. Now there's an issue with the style for the button. So for now, let's change that from a button to just a regular link. Actually, that's why we went to multiple lines. I just realized we had an extra carriage return line feed in. And now we should see the next one. And the link is missing. See, this is part of the fun of updating a site. Well, I suspect that it doesn't want to see links in there since we can link the entire slide to a specific location. Now forgive me for this particular detour, but unfortunately every theme manufacturer has its own little quirks. And there we go. So now you see the text has a randomly generated effect for each of the items. Now, we don't want this slide to really be there, so let's go ahead and delete it. Slide's been deleted successfully. Rearrange it to the way it was originally. The order has been saved. And we're looking good. So now we'll refresh. Back to 3 slides and back to the same order they were. Now you know how to change the sliders, the images, the text, animations, and pretty much anything else you want to change on that initial header slider. So happy updating.